everybody, and welcome to this edition of The Public Square. As often happens when the team sits down to discuss an important issue, sometimes the clock is the enemy. So today we're going to extend a conversation we had recently in The Public Square. Here's Dave Zanotti along with Alan C. Duncan, our producer, Rob Walgate, and Jonah Jackson on this edition of The Public Square.
We could not stop the conversation on gamification. And the reason was we got to the end of it and we realized that what we actually have here is a form of a cultural apologetic. Recognizing that generationally there are people today, lots of them, millions of people that have absolutely no experience whatsoever with the kind of sophisticated gaming systems that are available today to their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. And they're not about to slap on a pair of meta goggles and suddenly decide that they're going wherever those things take you into another world. Okay, their meat space is not moving that far.
No, what that has me thinking, though, is we had that discussion previously on the Public Square. Has anyone attempted or has anyone done like a biblical version game? I mean, I'm thinking about things that could be done, like some Old Testament stories. You want to talk about some destruction and
rated M for mature.
Yeah,
I do think there have been some. I can't name the production houses off the top of my head, but I do
be pretty intense.
I do think there have been some efforts at that.
I believe so. I couldn't name them off the top of my head, but I think that there are certainly, maybe not, AAA mainstream, major developers, but I do believe that there have been at least a few over time. Smaller independent studios have done sort of biblical storytelling through, or non-biblical storytelling, but using the characters and things. I think I remember one from a few years back. That I think you could play as Jesus.
The ultimate God mode?
Yeah, that was the New Testament version.
Yes. I'd never played it myself, but I'm pretty sure that was something that made headlines a few years back.
So the idea is that, first off, for people that are older, should they be afraid? Is this a genuine threat? For people who are raising children, this is sort of like the parent who says, well, I don't know what happened to those schools. And then they tell you everything about how when they were in school. And they're young. These are young parents. And then you say, well, how many years ago did you graduate? And they go, well, it's like 20 years ago. Have you been back to your school in the last 20 years? Well, no. Well, let's start with a visit. And they go, oh, my goodness. So there's that sort of gap in the world of gaming. Mm-hmm. Like the last time I played, we were doing X and it was fun and it was interesting, but also kind of addictive. But now, it's Y. It's something completely different, or Z. So there's that side of the equation as well. But the big question that we're asking is the question of reality. Now that happens to be a very deep philosophical question. The question of reality. Mm-hmm. How do we know what we think we know? Because one of the reasons that people are so frustrated generationally is they try to talk with people across generations and they have no common bridge to what would be an accepted uniform reality. The only time that happens, in the rarest of occasions, is perhaps on some holidays or at a funeral or maybe at a wedding. But the worlds are so dramatically different that then you come to a place of saying, well, how can people have a common experience in self-government if they see the reality of living so radically differently? And they don't read the same books. Mm-hmm. They don't attend the same conversations. They don't go to houses of worship in the same arena. Their educational experience is radically different. Where's the harmony?
This is just to add on to what you're saying. I forget. I'm not going to say what company it is. I think I forget what company it is. But I received a mailing from a company. I think they made clothes or shoes or something. And it was a photograph of their entire staff. And I looked at it, and it was very diverse in terms of the nationalities represented in it. And I thought, oh, that's cool. But then I noticed that every single person was under the age of 30. Mm-hmm. Every person. And I just thought, well, that's not actually true diversity.
And dressed almost always the same, I might add.
They were.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, and nothing against their ages or the way they were dressing, but it was clearly an attempt to display diversity, but all I saw was uniformity. People who do read the same books, dress the same, watch all the same movies, have all the same cultural references. You needed someone even younger, and you needed people even older to bring them across the finish line as a true diverse
It's
organization.
one of the reasons why we look at the way that elderly people are treated in this country. And now in the advanced planning and the financial consulting of it, the idea is once you hit 50, shocker, you need to have a plan that by the time you're 55, you're in an adults-only community because first off, you don't need to do that stuff anymore. You don't have to cut that grass and blah, 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 blah. Secondly, it's quieter. It's quiet. You're with, but we start segmenting ourselves into age brackets so that by the time people who are living longer are 75 years old, they are completely out of touch with anything that's happening outside their little cocoon.
And ironically, the only way that they have any connection to what's going on outside of that cocoon is through a screen, through watching the news, or through on their iPhone, keeping up on Facebook or what have you with their relatives.
They actually watch television. See, look, let's face it. There's a lot of people that don't realize it, but they don't watch television anymore.
I barely watch television anymore.
Even though it's you still call the unit a TV.
A TV, yeah, sure.
But you're not, that's not, you're streaming pre-produced video.
Which again is highly selective. You're selecting. You're not just turning on channel 3 and you're getting what everyone's getting.
Right.
You're picking what you want when you want to watch it.
The sense of community in regards to media and technology is literally disappearing into, here, I'll create a word, dumb word, siloization.
I like it. Yeah.
Sure. Better than meat space.
The Wallgates have been playing Scrabble, so if I use that word, can I call you as verification? Can I call you for verification?
If you can find that many letters on a Scrabble board, you got it. Okay. Now, speaking of board games, all right, in this MIT Tech Review discussion about all of this question of gamification and how it impacts reality for younger people, mostly, we also came across a supplemental article about how this whole mindset of how games influence reality popped up in one of the favorite games in America, which I'm going to say is pronounced in a million different ways. Catan, Catan.
No one's ever said Canon.
He's making up new pronunciations too.
All right. And so we turn to the resident expert, the man who is virtually undefeated in all attempts at Catan, unless his wife manages to distract him so sufficiently that she manages to get to 10 victory points. All right, Jonah Jackson. And so I sent that article specifically to you.
To me, our resident game enthusiast.
Yes.
I'm not going to say resident gamer because that doesn't feel right. I'll say game enthusiast.
I like it.
And puppeteer, and puppet master, I should say. However, I sent this to you, and you protest.
I think this is crazy. So this whole article, the headline here is, "These board games want you to beat climate change. What new board games featuring climate change, including a new version of Catan, tell us about grand problems and ourselves?" But the whole premise of this is that, and this isn't something brand new. The article goes on to mention other games like Pandemic. There are games.
There's a fun title,
right?
Wow.
Right?
Guess what? Yes, it takes 3 years to play, and you lose all your income.
But these games that essentially take a real world problem or a potential real world problem, because Pandemic was out way before COVID. I think 2013 was maybe when that came out. You're trying to stop a global pandemic. But this idea of...
I hope the gamers were more successful.
God, I hope so.
Does Fauci have ownership in that game?
He should have some stakes in that. But this idea of taking a real world problem or a potential real world problem, something that would be a feasible problem in the real world, and turning it into this sort of game concept, and how do you either prevent or accelerate said problem? Because on the opposite side of this, I know that, like the pandemic example, that's one where you're trying to prevent this. On the other hand, there are games where you are actually creating a virus that you're trying to spread all over the entire globe and take it over. So, there's application in both directions of this, and it's interesting in terms of trying to market to people to prevent this thing or in order to bring about complete and total destruction, depending on your
Have you ever got
proclivities.
hooked into playing Catan?
No.
Alan?
I haven't. No.
We gotta fix that, guys.
Yeah, I would play with Jonah. I
We
would.
gotta fix that. We gotta bring the board over here to the studio.
Okay. Banned word.
We can't even agree how to pronounce it.
Yes, that's right. Banned word inside there will be no Catan games played on the public square.
I would play with Jonah.
Period.
I'm bringing the board.
Well, here's the funny thing about the article. I read it as well.
But Catan is a wildly popular game, right? It's like the
Oh,
most
yes.
popular board game in America right now.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Catan is wildly popular. Has been since it came out in the '90s. Huge game. I love Catan, but what this article brings up is a new version of it that has come out.
Yeah, it's a global warming version, right? You're trying
Yes.
to prevent global warming. The person writing the article said that it's not fun. They said they made it sound like it's way too complex, first of all, and which again, we're forgetting the point of a game is to have fun.
Yes.
And then when this person who wrote the article, that's MIT as well, correct?
Yes. Both of these are MIT.
Both these are MIT. So
Which is a little staggering to think about. MIT and the legend that it has in regards to intellectual and scientific development in America is publishing articles about a board game.
well, they are. Yes. So the person who wrote the article was not happy when they won because they felt they kind of cheapened the seriousness of global warming.
Yes.
And so the makers of this game are in a lose-lose situation. You either lose the game and the Earth is destroyed through global warming, which is not fun, or you win the game and catastrophe is averted, but you're already philosophically committed to believing that the catastrophe is inevitable. Therefore, you're not happy that you won the game.
Right. Well, and because we have two games that we're talking about in here. One is Daybreak, this game that is actually made by the same people as the pandemic game, which the writer goes on talking about. This is the one that I was not having fun while I was playing this because I either won and again it kind of felt like this hollow victory, or I lost and I was like, oh, can we play again to try to get it right? And even after we're done playing, I'm just sitting here now in my bed just thinking about global catastrophe.
Again, missing the point of a game.
Again, right. Whereas with the Catan, it's the complaint was that it was oversimplified because it's this Catan new energies, and so you have a choice. I actually think this is interesting, and maybe this just says more about me. You can choose if you're playing, and it's cheaper and faster to build fossil fuel resources in this version of Catan, but you're causing pollution. Or you can try to do this clean energy power plant type thing. Either way, you're trying to get to 10 points. So that just says to me, why not try to antagonize everybody else playing the game and play as just an oil baron and get to 10 points and let them deal with it?
That's Jonah Jackson of Kids on the Square. And the Public Square guys will be back in just a moment to continue their conversation on this issue on the Public Square.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square. Every day, 535 people are charged with representing all of us in Washington, D.C. They preside over the largest budget in the world. They hold the Constitution in their hands. They can help protect our liberties or look the other way. 535 people. We put them in office. Isn't it time that we hold them in our prayers? A public service message from the American Policy Roundtable. Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
I love how these conversations unfold on the Public Square, totally unrehearsed. Let's return now to Dave and Alan and Rob and Jonah as they talk about gamification.
In our last segment, you now understand why the executive producer at Kids on the Square is someone you never want to play Catan with. because he manages to project himself so mightily into these games and figures out ways, even though he's never seen the board, on how he can actually win. It's a strange gifting package, but anyhow, it works to the advantage of so many other things. Alan, you had a question.
I do have a question. This I don't know if this takes us too far afield, but to me, reading that article made me think about the difference between art, because I'm assuming we would consider a good board game as a form of art.
I would.
Art versus propaganda. To me, something where this seems like somebody with a worldview is just jamming their global warming worldview down your throat in the form of a game, which doesn't necessarily sound like art to me. So I don't know. What do you guys think about the difference between propaganda and art?
I think that sometimes there's a fine line, because something can certainly, I don't know. A lot of time, I think that if you have someone who is an artist, and the artsy people tend to have pretty strong worldviews that they will, whether they intend to or not, will find their way into their work.
Sure.
And so I think that, there's a question of when do you cross that line? And especially with something like this, like with these games here, to me, it feels like, okay, the difference between Pandemic and Daybreak, these two games by the same creative team. Pandemic was obviously released far before COVID. Certainly there have been other, instances of pandemics and things of that nature throughout time, but it wasn't the sort of hot political topic now that the global warming is with this game that they've just released.
That's actually a pretty interesting distinction.
Yeah, because Pandemic in 2013 was more of a hypothetical.
Yeah, it was a what if.
Especially for Western society and culture. More so, what if? What would happen?
Yes. Wouldn't it be crazy if?
Part of the reason that I wanted to get to this far in this conversation, and I can recognize that some people have already turned off their radios or said, I'll get the next one. I'm going to stop this download, because we seem to be very far afield from the idea of what's the best kind of public policy for America in an arena of self-governance. But there's something we very rarely talk about in this country, and that is the propaganda dominance of climate change. And the reality that at every turn, there seem to be people, whether it's playing games or children's storybooks or Saturday morning cartoons or feature films, every vestige of media has the same message. Climate change is inevitable. It's your fault. The planet is dying. You're killing it. And if you don't change everything about the way you govern and live, you're responsible for everyone dying. That's the message. It's not moderated. It's not, it is an extremist message at every single level. And it dominates the political debate to the point where it's like Voldemort. It's like the thing we don't even name any longer because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And the reason I wanted to bring up this whole Catan story is to say, even in the most popular board game, they can't leave well enough alone. They've got to bring out a new dimension and say, and let's have a game which, by the way, you either save or destroy the world. And you feel bad about it either way. So this is the connection. We become what we think about, and we become what we play.
We do. But I do think there's that ability to, when it becomes real life, those hypotheticals, we may drift from that. And what I mean by that is I think about, Pandemic, if that was released in 2013, I would have loved to have seen everyone play the game and what their reactions would have been, or how they say they would have responded during a pandemic. Like many people thought we should rip the Constitution up and live by
There's
dictators.
a great question.
So,
from 2013 forward, did Pandemic conclude, have a what do they call them? NPC? No, not what's in the
NPC,
game.
non-player characters?
Yeah, do they have non-playing characters walking around with the Constitution saying, wait? No.
Yeah, so that would be interesting to see. Did
I mixed my idioms. I
people's
apologize.
perspectives change based upon the game and IRL?
Yeah, I was going to say, I got confused between meat space and IRL. All right, so
meat space is IRL.
Yeah, I guess. So why is this so important? Because look, we can get all hoity-toity here and all academic and all super spiritual and say the world is going to hell in a handbasket. We're in the middle of a massive election crisis and on and on and on. You know what? I never met a Christian. I don't care how many hair buns they had, how many homeschool jumpers they wore. I don't care how many days a week they wore a suit, used hair gel. I don't care how many Bibles they stacked up. Most of them had a deck of cards in their house.
Oh, unless you were a Baptist.
Hey, I grew up Baptist. We had cards.
And then they played dominoes or something else. Okay? People play games.
Yeah.
They always have.
They're fun.
They always will.
Should be.
C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity made the simple statement, we must play because God designed us with that gene, if you will, for joy. And joy is exhibited in play. We all do it, even if it's in our imaginations. So let's take it down a few notes. Let's leave the Listerine in the cabinet. And let's just take a second and say, we all play.
Mm-hmm.
And play is a part of our mind and our development and our thought patterns. And there are people out there right now who want us to play in God mode. They want us to believe that we can control the climate. It's a con. They're even putting it in the most popular board game in the country. That it's a con. That if we all just get together, we can change the entire climate. Okay, how are you going to do that? I mean, if you take the entire global warming reality and take every answer that they've afforded us, and if we did them all tomorrow, 100% plus, how much of it would actually change? You know, the answer is, they don't know.
No, they don't know.
Because they never built that computer model.
No, they didn't. And that's the problem as well. Listen, when we talk about science, they only want to lean on the word science when it's convenient for them.
When it gets them the result they want.
I saw a side-by-side comparison last week of Bill Nye talking about carbon, and what he was saying about carbon in the 80s and 90s is vastly different than what he's saying about carbon today. And I'm like, wait a minute here. He was a science guy, and we had to trust the science back then when I was a kid. He's not saying the same thing. So what changed?
In the 70s, they were telling kids in high school and colleges that we were going to have an ice age and all freeze to death. It was inevitable. This is true. This is real science, real history, real research.
Well, and now Rob and I just had a recent conversation on 1850 Main Street about the fact that the earth is now greener, way greener now than it's been within the past, couple of decades?
Yes.
There's more greenery, more trees absorbing
more
the CO2.
CO2. Mm-hmm. Gee, isn't that interesting? And so now, here they are. They're ultimately finally revealed themselves. They're all climate deniers. All right, where's the board game that burns them forever in hell? Okay, I get all that.
Probably Daybreak. Daybreak would probably do that.
The Babylon Bee, I believe it was the Babylon Bee, had an article on how someone who spouts global warming like crazy was flying in their private jet and is furious with all the cows they see underneath them, spewing out all the...
All right. The point of this isn't to have a scientific debate because that's fine. Love those debates. And we've watched lots of them and we can have gazillions of them. The point is somehow all of this conversation we've had about gaming, I can't get past the idea that they call it the God mode. Because ultimately the formula of the godless equation is autonomy. And when we're walking in autonomy, we're playing in the God mode. We can do what we want. We are completely independent. We control the circumstances and the outcomes. And in essence, we don't need any help to change the world. And the premise of this whole thing coming up out of MIT was that people thought that if you could create the kind of human behavior in meat space or IRL that you had inside games, you would change the world. Now they said, guess what? That ain't going to work. So God mode doesn't work. That's the point.
Not when we want to be God.
Because we just still, in spite of all the plugins, all the microtransactions, and all of that stuff, we can't muster the power that it takes because we're just not. And then the other part of it is none of us has an unlimited battery. Right?
It's going to run out.
It's reality.
IRL.
And that's a wrap on this conversation today on the Public Square, which is really an extension of an earlier conversation on our long-form program, which is available online at thepublicsquare.com. Listen to them together at thepublicsquare.com. Thanks for joining us.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.